Welcome to a Beyond the Reason tier listing video. Today we're going to talk about all of these different Cortex bot units and where I would rate them on a tier listing scale here. We got S as being the most overpowered units, A as being a very good unit in general, B being pretty decent but not like the best, C being either situational or kind of trolly, and then D being absolutely trash in my opinion. Keep in mind these are all my opinions, so you may have a different perspective. Anyway, we're just going to be looking at Cortex bots for now. We're not going to be doing all of the units in Beyond All Reason because that we'd be sitting here for forever. So we're just going to start off with the Grunt. That is going in S tier, absolutely. Reason being it's a very core unit. It has a lot of DPS for the total metal cost. It's a little bit more energy dense than other units, but it's just a very great unit overall, and it can also be used as spam later in the game to block attacks from like heavy hitting weapons such as like the pulsar or the starlight sniper fires, things like that. So it's a very, very powerful unit. Then we have the Grave Robber. This is also going to be in the S tier. Very, very powerful, able to resurrect units on the battlefield and basically act like a mini factory on the front line, which can be really powerful to get you in a position where you're ahead of your opponent because you're multiplying your forces that were recently killed. So very strong. I'm going to put the Thrasher in the A tier as it is a good weapon. It's a good anti-air for like beginning, but it starts to fall off once you hit T2, as a lot of the units do. Obviously Grave Robber and Grunt will have their uses in later on in the game, but the anti-air bot, the Thrasher, not quite as significant as it could, but it still is a solid anti-air, especially for fighting off Shuris or gunships that might be trying to harass you. And then we've got the Thug. This is going to be in the A tier as well, as it is a very strong core unit, but it does have certain situations it falters in, such as going up against a lot of spam. The Thugs are more better for grouping up together in a ball, and so if you're trying to go a one-to-one against spam, it can be a little bit harder to actually take out the spam because of the rotation speed and the length of time plasma bullets take to fire. Then we have the Rocket Bot. This is also going to be in the A tier, as it is very strong but also situational. It does take a little bit extra micro to be able to use effectively, as you can't go too far into a group of armies because it can be overwhelmed easily and shut down quickly, as it doesn't have a ton of HP and it doesn't have a lot of DPS. The main thing with the Rocket Bot is the fact that it has a significant range, so a very, very powerful unit in that way. Scuttle. This is going to be C tier. It is powerful, it is good, but it doesn't have, it's very situational, because on the open battlefield it's going to end up, actually I think this might technically be the Bedbug, which would be the non-cloaked version of the Scuttle. There's two different types. Let me see. So this is Scuttle, I believe, and this is Bedbug. So the Bedbug is a non-cloaked explosive bomb that is amphibious, so you can put it into the ocean and like go up, and it's basically a traveling mine that will explode. So it's very strong in that manner, and it's relatively cheap, but it just is rather situational because it's not the best spam. When it explodes, it's a big explosion which can damage other team units around it, so it has to be done very carefully. The Scuttle is also going to be in the C tier. As now, I know some people are probably going to complain about this and think it's a little bit better than that, but it's hard to get through in late game and actually be able to do damage with it. It does cloak, but it will give off a radar signature. There's a lot of issues with trying to actually use these units on the front line to do significant damage. Situationally, it is very good, but only situationally. Radar Jammer. We're going to put these Radar Jammer and the Radar Bot in the B tier. The only reason for that is the fact that they are easily countered by Juno missiles, and I think that can be a significant issue. They are strong, but they're not like your army can still function without it. And if you're doing, you can basically have two choices for vision. You can go for the radar jammer combo, or you can go for the spam combo to be able to pump out units that have a larger line of sight. And oftentimes I see people going for the spam a little bit more frequently, just so that they can't be shut down so easily with one Juno missile taking out their vision. But these will be more commonly paired with things like Sheldon, or even sometimes the Arbiter or the Mammoth are decent to pair with the radar and radar jammer, as any unit that has extended range will do pretty well. Spybot. This guy is the Spectre, very, very powerful, and I'm going to put in the S tier. Absolutely. This is a core unit for all of your games. If you aren't using him, he is very powerful if you use him carefully. It's more of a support unit, but it has the ability to self-destruct and cause an EMP to even most T3 units. So if you have a bunch of Razorbacks coming towards you, you can just build one of those and EMP on that Razorback, and it'll stop it dead in its tracks. It won't be able to fire, and then you can just surround it with some weaker units and kill it. So a very, very strong unit that you should add into your gameplay quite a bit. Fiend we're going to put in A tier. It's close to S tier, but it's not quite there. Reason being is it does tend to fall off after a certain point in the game. Once you start getting a lot of anti-spam and a lot of heavier hitting units that are on the front line, the Fiend begins to dip in value. And that's just because it has a lower DPS and its speed. You have a certain threshold before you don't end up reaching your target. And so if you can't make it to the enemy, there's no point in building that unit. And that's why I think Fiends are very, very powerful early T2, but start to fall off once you get towards the later T2 phase, because you start getting longer range units and units that are just able to push back that spam. Twitcher, this is going to be we'll put him in the A tier. He is a very strong unit. He's more of a support unit. He is good at building certain defensive structures, like trying to remember the Cortex version, but it's the artillery. The T2 artillery is pretty powerful and very popular, so I'm going to put that in the A tier. Ducks we're going to put in the B tier. They are good, but the fact that they are amphibious in nature, they are somewhat situational as well. They're very strong, but they are situational. So that I don't personally use the duck a lot, but they do have a lot of opportunities to be used. They have a very good laser weapon. I also believe they are EMP resistance, if I remember correctly. A very good unit and very strong for water maps that you want to try to move from land to water to land. Very, very effective in that manner. Next, we have the Sheldon. We're going to put these in the S tier. They are very powerful units, and if you get a good ball of them grouped up and have a decent support line in front of them, they will be able to deal lots of damage, especially early on in the game, towards like the middle of the mid game. They are very effective at breaking through some of those early defenses and just constantly chipping away at the front line. Sumo, we're going to put in the A tier. He is very, very strong, but starts to fall off once again as you get into the later mid game, because he doesn't have very good range. He's good at anti-spam, and honestly, you will often see these two paired together. The Sumo and Sheldon go great together because the Sheldon kind of struggle with the spam. If there's a bunch of ticks swarming them, the Sheldon can die to them, but the Sumo is able to take those out pretty easily. Construction bots, we're not going to deal with the construction bot. I accidentally added him. Arbiter, we're going to put in the B tier. He is somewhat situational. He's very effective as he does have extremely long range, and he's very good at taking out static defenses. But once you start to get closer and closer in range with him, he becomes less and less effective. That rocket takes a decent amount of time to actually launch out of him and hit the target. And the surface area that it's actually impacting is rather minor, honestly. It's not the the biggest surface area. So in that way, I think he doesn't really perform well at targeting specific units that often, but is decent at getting through higher level static defense and breaking through the line without taking damage, as some of your more core frontline units, such as your mammoths, your Sheldon, your sumos, those will be able to be protected while aggressing at the defenses of the enemy team, just with the arbiter from a good range. Termite, we'll put in the C tier. I want to put him in the B tier, but he's kind of like a mix between B and C, so we'll put him in the C tier just so that the Scuttle and Bedbug have a little bit of friendly units there to hang out with. He is pretty strong, but he's only strong at close range, and so the counterpart to the Termite would be the Recluse, which is the Armada version of it, and the Recluse has a longer range and is about just as fast. So when the Termite and Recluse go head to head, the Termite usually loses out unless it's at a angle where they can meet close range. So I would say it's situational and not the most effective unit you can definitely build. The Manicure, I think, is D tier. It's expensive, and you're just better off building some actual static defenses for anti-air rather than going for the Manicure. He just doesn't have the DPS required to take out a significant portion of anti-air of the air units above. I would only build him if I absolutely have to. The Commando, we're going to put in C tier, as the Commando is a unique unit. He can do some pretty crazy things, but he's not the toughest, and he doesn't have the ability to really impact the game in a significant way, and that's the issue. You have to have units that are able to we'll just say this: the meta is the meta for a reason, and the units that are most commonly used for a reason. The Commando has been used on occasion somewhat effectively, but it's situational and difficult to really have game-ending plays with the Commando. He does have build power, he does have a radar jammer, and he can build his own scouts and transports, which is good, but it's just not enough to impact the game. Also, when he gets shots, when one of his transports gets shot down, he does still land and survive, so that could be good in certain occasions. Maybe we'll see him become meta on certain maps, but oftentimes it's pretty tough to win games with him. Mammoth, we're going straight to S tier. Super tanky. It's like a tier 2.5. Very, very effective. It can go head to head with many T3 units, such as the Razorback. It will shut down Razorback. So if you have like 2 or 3 Mammoths, you can shut down Razorbacks pretty easily, and it can shut down a Marauder one-on-one. So it's very effective at shutting down some of those later T3 units as well. Very strong unit. I'm gonna put the Karganeth C tier. I would say it's closer to B tier, but I'm going to say C tier. It is situational. It doesn't have that much health, and its DPS is kind of low. It has a little bit of anti-air on it, which is good, and that can be good for supporting, and the fact that it can climb up hills and go over terrain is very nice. But the Karganeth just, I don't know. It's not a unit I use frequently, and the reason for that is it just takes too long to kill. The time to kill is too long with the Karganeth. Shiva, we're going to put in A tier. Very, very powerful unit, able to blast away at any T1 units. If you have a cluster of T1 units, it'll just shred the whole entire ball of them very, very effectively. It also has a longer range missile out of the top of it, so it can do some anti-static defense as well with that missile. So I definitely recommend the Shiva, and it gets pumped quite frequently, but you do have to be careful with it because it can self-destruct its allies. Then we have the Catapult. In the right hands is an S tier unit. In the right hands, as the Catapult has an extremely long range, and it does like a big area of damage effect. The only risk you have with the catapult is that you are not paying attention to where it is shooting. And if you aren't paying attention to where it's shooting, it can end up hitting your allies and kill some of your own bases entirely because you let it just dumb fire wherever you want. So often I would recommend putting these on hold fire and doing a very specific directional attack with it. Okay, demon, I'm gonna put in C tier. I'm not a huge fan of the demon. I think it is good at wiping out spam, but it has very low health, and it's just, I mean, it's fast and it has some anti-spam, but it's kind of one of those units that falls off over time. Anything like snipers or starlights, pulsars, things of that nature, it's just gonna get completely wiped out by. So I can't recommend that you push demons late game, and it's more of a very early T2 unit or T3 unit that you would want to pump out and try to gain the advantage of a quick fast attack with it. The behemoth I'm gonna put in S tier actually, and some of you might be confused by this, but the reason why it's S tier in my opinion is the fact that once you get into the late game and say the front lines are completely stalled, there is nothing better at taking out and pushing through defenses than a behemoth. If you don't have one of these built on your team, once you get into the late game, you can stall out for forever. But the behemoth is able to push slowly through into the enemy position and create a little bit of a hole in the defenses that they have so that you can actually break through an end game. So it's an end game unit that's very effective at what it does. The last unit, the Juggernaut, I'm going to end up putting in the B tier, as it is very strong. It does have a lot of DPS and it is a very tanky unit, but it costs even more than the behemoth, and I think the behemoth does a little bit better at everything the Juggernaut can do. The one nice thing about the Juggernaut is the fact that you can put it directly into the backline. If you can get the Juggernaut there, it explodes like a nuclear bomb when it dies. So that is a very powerful effect it has on its own just by itself. So that is one thing to keep in mind, but it just doesn't quite have enough HP to push through the front line effectively, in my opinion. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned a little bit about Cortex bots. Hopefully, you'll be able to use these strategies effectively on your own, and we will see you guys on the battlefield.